Hi everybody, International Master David Pruess here with Week 9's highlights from the Pro Chess League. This is also the last week of normal 4 versus 4 matches for the season, because the last week will be some intra-divisional battle royales to determine final placings in the league. So in the final set of matches, we had a surprising number of blowouts this week, despite a lot of teams, seeming like perfectly strong going into the week. So some surprising results for sure. But just quickly, I'm going to go through division by division a couple of the most exciting positions and games, and also tell you what the situation is there going into that final battle royales. Which team needs to do what in order to get a playoff spot or win first place in their division, or etc. So we're starting in the Pacific Division, where the Pandas edged ahead of the Destiny for first place in the Pacific. For the first time in a while, the Destiny have had like a crazy second half of the season. But that will still be determined for sure by the Battle Royale results, which team gets first place in the Pacific. Meanwhile, the Kangaroos gained a lot of ground, and the San Jose Hackers sort of have a shot to catch them maybe, and the Mechanics an outside shot to catch them. There's a pretty crazy thing that happened in this position and in this match. This is from the match between the Minnesota Blizzards, and we've got International Master Kleinebia here with black, Thomas Beardson, against Grandmaster Z Kid with white. And as you can see, there's stuff hanging on both sides of the board, right? Like, it doesn't quite make sense how many black pieces are next to the white king. Zierk only had 20 seconds here, unfortunately, for white. Beardson sacks the rook on h8 with check and keeps going with his king. Yeah, comes here, and now we see the idea of the rook sack was he wants to just checkmate with a humble little pawn on a2, and basically there's only black pieces next, in the quadrant of the white king, so there's nothing white can do except maybe give this check. Beardson puts his king on the wrong square magically. Should have gone to e7. Queen takes b3 is played. And rook to b8 is the idea here, which should basically finish off the white king, except white now has the miraculous move, queen takes c4. Because if queen takes queen, there's rook takes d6 check, winning the queen. That's why the king should have been on e7, so this wouldn't be check. Despite that, there's another twist to this plot. After bishop c3 check, the white king should move up to c2. And then, if rook b2 check, take on c3 as well. But the king moves to c1, and now rook b1 check. The king should still go to c2, but, Zierk had like 2 seconds to play each move there, and gets checkmated by the queen resigned here. King c1, queen b2, king d1, queen b1 mate. So that was a roller coaster of a finish for that game. And it was part of the Minnesota Blizzard coming back from down 8-4 to sweep the fourth round 4-0, only time it's ever happened in Pro Chess League history as far as I know, and tie the match 8-8, improving their standings going into the playoffs and hurting the Mechanics' chances of catching the Kangaroos. Here's a Kangaroo in action. Alexei Serana, back from the Aeroflot Open, dispatches low-rated opponent with ease here as black. Knight to g4. Threatening queen h2 check. It turns out white can't stop that, because if white had played pawn takes knight, follow this in your heads if you can, Serrano would play rook takes f2, threatening queen h2 mate. And if king f2, queen h2 check, the king can't run anywhere except to f3 or f1. In either case, rook f8 checkmates the king. Try visualizing that 2 or 3 times in your head. It's a good exercise. Instead, white defended f2, and Serrano took all this, and white resigned. They're losing the queen after king e2, rook f2, check, for example. All right, moving on to the Atlantic Division. In the Atlantic, the Archbishops suffered a surprising upset at the hands of the Miami Champions, who went from the worst team in the league 2 to 3 weeks ago, or arguably the worst team in the league 2 to 3 weeks ago, to arguably the best team in the league over the last 2 to 3 weeks, winning a battle royale in sole first place, and now knocking out the #1 team in the Atlantic, the St. Louis Archbishops. They've got 3 all-stars on their team at this point. in Pavel Elyanov, Eduardo Iturrizaga, and Qianxi Wang. So just like their team is set. It's like stacked. What a lineup they have. They beat the Caruana and Wesley So team here. But all it's going to do for them is perhaps allow them to avoid relegation, since they've only turned it on with 3 weeks left in the season. Still, every team should fear them in the final battle royale tomorrow. Here is Elyanov knocking off Fabiano Caruana. If you do not see that the storm clouds have gathered on the king side around the Black King, then you have no sense of danger at all. Here, Elyanov is ready to make it rain. He just cracks the king position with rook takes f5. I mean, you could not recapture, but then you're down a piece as well as all this misery. So So Caruana takes it, threatens to come in and checkmate him with the rook and the queen. Here the threat is what? Rook h7, king h7, queen g7 mate. So something must be done about it. A spite check. Well, that won't quite do it. Something else. There we go. Now if rook h7, the rook is defending queen g7 mate. H7, okay. Rook takes rook, queen g7 mate is not so good. But here he resigned as well because it's also inevitable mate. Rooks trade, pawn takes, check. Rook takes back, queen h6 mate. So yeah, Elyanov takes them down. The archbishops are still just barely in first place, but the battle royale will determine first place between the archbishops and the marshals, who are now basically in a dead heat for first. The other important match was between the 4th and 5th place teams. The Chess Bras and the Sopranos. Here we've got the real Pascal as black trying to trade off the bishop on d3 before Ivan Saric, the obviously dominant leader of the Chess Bras, can destroy his king. But, Saric is going to kill his king no matter what. Despite only scoring 3 and not 4 points this week, he is definitely going to score against this king. He just keeps his bishop on the board, even though it allows bishop e2. What does he care? Then he says, actually, I didn't need this bishop either. Whatever. Sacks it on g6. If h takes g6, he can play rook to h3. And if bishop takes queen, rook h8 mate. And if black plays f5 to get space for his king, queen g6 mate. So black took with the f-pawn. Queen takes e6 check. Rook f7, rook h3. He develops his attack. Threatens rook takes h7, king takes h7, queen takes f7. So Pascal defends the rook on f7, but then maybe you guys have seen this in a Puzzle Rush or Tactics book, depending on your age. This is a winning sacrifice if pawn takes queen, rook h8 is mate. If rook g7, queen g7 is just as well. And if king f8, queen h6, king g8, rook g3. Just makes it last a little bit longer for Saric. So with that, the Chess Bras put themselves ahead of the Sopranos by a good margin going into the final battle royale. The Sopranos will have to have a pretty good battle royale showing, though it's certainly possible to catch the Chess Bras and seize that final spot. Meanwhile, while these people were playing chess, Grandmaster Sergei Zhigalko and International Master Smooth as a Hedgehog were winning the award for synchronized swimming. La da da da, the kings are so perfect. But all was not perfect in paradise, apparently, because something soured in this relationship between move 20 and move 68. Yeah, this locked position, you shouldn't be surprised it was a long game, because around here it became clear that Smooth as a Hedgehog was pretty insistent about actually winning this locked drawn position. And finally he crashed through with knight takes g2. Queen takes g2, knight h3. Yeah, he can't take on h2 at any point because that pawn will just be a new queen. And if knight takes h3, bishop takes h3, and his queen is trapped. So she has to trade on h2 and let black get a new queen, or just die where she stands. Bishop f1 was played supporting the queen, and after black took on g2, they were now winning with the following maneuver. White's finally covering h2, but in comes black and chases the king away and goes for knight f2. And yeah, from synchronized swimming to vicious grinding. That was the Atlantic Division this week. Moving on to the Eastern Division. The Eastern Division featured a series of blowouts that really surprised me. I thought this was a week where the gentlemen might be in danger of getting upset by the Mumbai Movers, but instead they scored like 11 and a half points or something and became the first team to reach 200 points, which is obscene because other top teams in the league have like 170. So the gentlemen and the Eagles, each with blowout wins, are still in a dead heat for first somehow. Clearly the first and second best teams in the league at this point, I would think. And the Battle Royale will have to determine which of them finishes in first place in the East. Here's a highlight actually for the Movers against the gentlemen. The games that they did win were like amazing highlight moments, but overall they didn't put together 8 of them. So in this position, White Abhidabi, or Grandmaster Abhimanyu Puranik, realizes that with this development lead, there's got to be some way to crack things open. He finds it. He just says, hey, I'm going to play knight d6 check. Well, that can't be allowed. Knight d5 to, restrain the d file and have the bishop defend d6. But he doesn't care about you trying to block the d file. He doesn't care that you think you've got d6 defended. He just opens up a new file over here. Oh, yeah, there's a good defense with queen e6. He just doesn't care. He's threatening rook e1. The king has to start running and running. And finally, the king gets all safe, and then he just queens his d-pawn. Oops. GG. Queen hanging, whatever. Rook e8, that'll do it. If the king ever came to a7, queen c5 would be decisive, right? So, very nice game by Abhimanyu. But not enough. Over in the other match that I alluded to, we've got Grandmaster Malev, who's had some great moments this year, very instructive games for the Estonia horses, Jan Elvest. He decides to take apart Shant Sargsyan's center. But what's really about to get taken apart? Have you guys ever seen this exchange sack before in like a French defense structure to get the pawn on d4? Yeah? Great idea, right? Suddenly, black's bishops are going to be able to come to life. He could play e5 and have this mobile center or whatever. But wait a minute, queen d5. Okay, well, I guess black's center came apart too, right? But at least he can get both bishops onto both open diagonals and fight, right? Can't he fight? What? Wait, you didn't need that e6 pawn. The queen? What? Bishop d5, rook c8 check. Absolute sickness. If king f7, then knight d8 check wins the queen to the rook on e1. If bishop f8, then rook f8 also forces the queen to trade off. In either case, black's just doesn't have enough material. Plays queen f7, still hoping, your queen's attacked. Maybe I'll get this knight at some point, maybe. But, at this point, you just know that something bad is happening. And look how Shant finishes this off. He keeps his queen on the diagonal of that bishop. He's like, you don't control d5 or e4, man. I'm going to checkmate you on h7. It's so foul. I don't know what to say. Obviously, bishop e4, rook c8. You guys know the drill at this point. Wins for white. So bishop f6 is played to defend h7. Then he just captures the knight on d4. Still just happy-go-lucky, leaving his queen hanging on e4. Finally, it's taken. Check. King has to come up. And rook c7. He still picks up that queen. And, yeah, white went on to win. Yeah. So don't mess with Shant. I mean, one guy managed to mess with him. He actually lost one game today. He only scored 3 out of 4 from board 3 and maintained his 2,700 performance and continues to be one of the 3 or 4 most valuable players in the league, arguably, argued by me. Let's see another highlight here. Abhijit Gupta for the Dynamite, who are not doing that well, but they do well in this game. A4, a typical little distraction, right? Just deflecting that queen on b3 from the pawn on c2. Just trading a pawn on the queen side, right? Is that all? Nope, that's not all. He's got a very concrete idea. He wants to sack his queen to do this. Trap that king in a little box, but the king hasn't escaped. So how good is this? Check here, bishop d3. It transpires the queen has nowhere to hide from this rook catching her with a discovered check, and king a1, pawn to b2 check doesn't hide the king either. So the queen is returned, and at the end of it all, White's rook is overworked on h1. Yeah, he hadn't moved all game. He was just chilling on h1, so he's the kind of guy who any work is overwork, right? So Abhijit comes up a piece and wins. In this division, there will be a chance for the Stormbringers possibly to catch the movers for the fourth and final playoff spot, since the Stormbringers had a huge win this week and the movers got mowed down. So a tiny chance from the surging Stormbringers to maybe catch up in that battle royale, but they'll have to compete with the Gentlemen and Eagles to get a really top spot in order to get enough points to catch up. So that could be tough, since the Gentlemen and Eagles are kind of trying to compete on their own plane here. Moving on to the Central Division, we had 3 emphatic wins from the top 3 teams: the Gnomes, the Mosquitoes, and the Baden-Baden Snowballs. They just smacked them down, surprisingly one-sided, and cement their playoff spots. The last playoff spot will come down to Marseille, Migraines, and the Raptors. The Raptors, who here have the white pieces in the hands of Carlos Kamayonga, about to get worked over by Grandmaster Alexander Donchenko. But the Raptors lost. The Migraines drew their match against the Berlin Bears and will have to... The Marseille Migraines and the Raptors will have to try and catch the Khan Blitzstream in the Battle Royale to get that last playoff spot from them. Let's see how Donchenko does this. First, he's completely controlled b3, c4, d5 to establish his pieces on good squares. He's got this weak diagonal headed to h2. White would have liked to play g3 long ago, but they played h3. And now Donchenko just advances the g-pawn. Nothing can stop it. The knight moves. He comes in. And now, remember, you don't always want to chase your opponent's king away. If you're trying to catch him, sometimes you just want him to stay in place, man. The knight takes control of e2, threatening mate. When white captures the knight, bishop c4 check, forces him to block himself in on e2. That's mate. Donchenko scored 4 out of 4 on board 2 and didn't even get nominated for MVP of the week for this division. So, go figure. Those are the highlights from me. If you want more Pro Chess League, there is obviously Pro Chess Lessons, where we look in more depth at an instructive example. And those are over at the Pro Chess League's YouTube channel. And of course, this week on Tuesday and Thursday, you will see the final battle royales of the regular season, determining the final teams that will be playing in the playoffs thereafter. So enjoy all that battle royale action. I can't wait. 3.5 hours times 4 nonstop excitement like this. See you there.